This presentation is for EDFD653, Assignment 1A. My name is Mengya Gu. Overall, I found the issues discussed in the key readings are thought-provoking. They prompt me to reflect on the things that I took for granted before, and I'm going to discuss them in details. First of all, let's look at Chapter 5, Social Class and Inequality. I'd like to discuss this issue in relation to education from two perspectives. On one hand, it is evident that disparities between schools are constantly reproducing class-based inequalities. This quote demonstrates a prevalent phenomenon in Australia. Privileged children are sent to private schools with good resources, while disadvantaged children are enrolled in public schools. That those who are enrolled in programs like IBDP are much more likely to enter the most prestigious universities around the world compared to their peers from disadvantaged background is a manifestation of the second quote here. And that is why parents are happy to pay the considerable fees charged by these schools. By contrast, those from low SES background tend to fall into a vicious circle. Due to financial constraints, they have no option other than public schools, which are less likely to support them to enter higher education. As a result, they are unlikely to get higher status occupations and change their status in the society. Consequently, the disparity between different social classes will be further enlarged. Personally, I found those from low SES background are highly disadvantaged in this situation. If they want to be as successful as those in the upper class, they probably need to make much more efforts. As suggested in the article, Big 5 Challenges in School Education, to ease this problem largely depends on funding from the government. On the other hand, I believe education is one of the few means available that facilitate people to achieve upward social mobility. My own experience is an example of intergenerational upward social mobility. Neither of my parents have been to university, and both of them are doing basic office work. However, they afford me the opportunity to come to Australia to study, and this is expected to help me to get a middle-class occupation, becoming a teacher in the future. Therefore, I think while the education system intensifies social stratification to some extent, education assists people to get access to better opportunities and resources. Chapter 6 overall shows that culture, migration, and education and the relation between them are dynamic and constantly evolving. Being an international student from China myself, I resonated with many issues discussed in this chapter when reading through it. First of all, I'd like to talk about identity. This quote from the chapter indicates that many migrants and their children often face problems related to identity. I will take a friend that I got to know through church as an example. Her name is Mickey and was born in Australia. Her parents are from China, but her Chinese proficiency is not good. As the church is Chinese community-based, in many occasions she can't participate in the conversation between the church members because of language barriers. I remember once she told me that she constantly experiences a lack of sense of belonging. On one hand, she can't feel connected with people from Chinese background because she has very limited knowledge about the language and the culture. This hinders her to have effective communication with them. On the other hand, she can't fit in with her Anglo-Australian friends either, because she is often seen as an outsider to them. The highly skilled migrant, whose name is Zheng He, discussed in this chapter, also has a similar experience with my friend Mickey. While he feels that he has become part of the Australian society and culture, he can't completely integrate into it. Given the fact that 40% of Australians are either migrants or have one parent who migrated to this country, many students in schools may encounter similar experience as Zheng He and my friend Mickey in their day-to-day life. Such experience is referred to as having weak cultural identity. Cultural identity is defined as the sense of attachment a person has to a particular group, including both ethnic identity and national identity. It is suggested that there is a positive correlation between cultural identity and self-esteem. Self-esteem, which is closely related with psychological well-being, plays an important role in students' learning. Therefore, I reckon helping students to foster a strong cultural identity is crucial. Teachers and parents should work on this in partnership. My KLA is Mandarin Chinese. Therefore, when I was reading the section about the language programs promoted in schools in Australia, I found it very relevant to me. While the amount of secondary school students learning Chinese in New South Wales increased by 60% from 2008 to 2015, 94% of the non-Chinese background learners dropped out before year 12. Various reasons contributing to this are listed in the text. One of the reasons is related to the scaling practices in the HSC exam. Through talking with the experienced Chinese teachers in my previous prac schools, I learned that many students with Chinese heritage are deterred to study the subject Chinese heritage because there is a myth that is, this subject doesn't scale well. In addition, based on my experience in practicum and a report published by Asia Education Foundation, I think another reason is that students often struggle to develop their language proficiency to the expected level within a limited period of time. In order to improve the retention rate of language students, these problems must be addressed by the authorities. In Chapter 8, the issue particularly standing out to me is that many parents are unhappy about female teachers substantially outnumbering males in classrooms because they believe that lack of male role models in schools has negative effects on their boys. Partially because of this, male teachers are finding it relatively easy to become permanent full-time teachers or get promotions to leadership positions. By contrast, many female teachers struggle with moving up on the list towards a permanent teaching position or a leadership position. As a female pre-service teacher, I found this kind of situation quite frustrating, because I know that I'm likely to be disadvantaged because of my gender down my career path, but what I can do alone to change this situation is very limited. In order to reduce the gender-based inequalities in the profession of teaching, female teachers need to work together in partnership. Female teachers should jointly strengthen their content knowledge and develop effective pedagogies that cater for the learning needs of individual students, because studies show that teachers with these attributes are effective regardless of whether they are male or female. Subsequently, evidence that demonstrates female teachers are effective in educating boys needs to be widely shown to parents and the public to eliminate their prejudice. Overall, based on my understanding of the three issues discussed above, here are some thoughts of what I can do as a teacher. First of all, in the readings, it is suggested that people from low SES background or certain ethnic groups tend to fall into a pattern of underachievement. In some cases, they may respond to it or, in another word, protest it through bullying others. These students often end up with going into labor market without qualifications and with very weak employment prospects. I think what I can do is to convince students from such background that the concept of life chances is something actually exists rather than a fantasy, through showing them real-life examples and role models. These students need to believe that their class position can be transformed if they make effort. At the same time, I should have high expectation towards all students, regardless of their socio-economic and cultural background and gender. I need to identify those who are locked into trajectories of low achievement as early as possible and provide intensive support for them. Moreover, girls who are left behind, in particular, need extra support. The reason is due to the fact that traditional apprenticeships remain overwhelmingly male-dominated. Young women who drop out high school won't have much good labor market options compared to their male counterparts. I believe this is one of the ways of promoting equality in the classroom. Secondly, as illustrated by the example of Vicky and Than in Chapter 5, all students have rich cultural capital. Nevertheless, the home backgrounds and cultures of working class and refugee students, and also those from diverse cultural background, are less likely to promote them to succeed in school, because they are unsupportive of the knowledge and skills that are considered valuable in school. Therefore, I as a teacher, on one hand, should explicitly explain the norms and values of the mainstream culture in school to these groups of students. On the other hand, I should acknowledge and value the cultural assets they bring to the classroom. For example, some Australian Aboriginal cultures having collectivist orientations consider interdependence as a goal of development. As a result, students from these Aboriginal communities are likely to prioritize goals of the community. I need to help them understand the mainstream Australian culture, which tends to have individualist orientations, emphasizing individual responsibility, choice, and achievement. At the same time, I should get to know their priorities and goals of education so that I can build on their learning preferences. Furthermore, I can also incorporate students' home culture into teaching. For example, I can encourage students to tell stories of their home cultures to the whole class. Such teaching and learning activities not only can deepen the other students' understanding of the subject content, but also can reduce misunderstandings of that culture had by students from other cultural backgrounds, preventing bullying and racism at root. Meanwhile, it can establish a sense of belonging, improves the students' self-esteem, and strengthen their cultural identity. Lastly, this story is from the chapter about gender. It shows that how teachers' ignorance of bullying based on sexuality can amplify the problem. It prompts me to reflect on my own perception of issues related to gender, homosexuality, and etc. If I don't have appropriate perceptions towards those who are effeminate or homosexual, I guess I won't be able to address bullying targeting at this group of students effectively. Here is the reference list. Thank you for your attention.